From South Carolina Public Radio, this is the South Carolina Lede. I'm your host, Gavin Jackson, and this episode was recorded on February 28th, 2025, here in South Carolina Public Radio studios in Columbia. Last day of February, shortest month is over, and now March Madness is here. And I'm not talking about basketball. On this episode of The Lead, we're recapping major bills in action in the state Senate and House from this week, including the school voucher bill. In fact, I have an interview with House Education Committee Chairwoman Shannon Erickson about that in a minute, and we'll get you caught up on what the House did to the Senate's plan and where it goes next, and much more. In fact, we even have a little econ data. No 2026 watch, though.
2026 watch.
You see what I did there. But the month is over, like we said, and March Madness is here, so we need you to call us at 803-563-7169. What's driving you mad this March? Get on down to your local Kia and find a great deals this March. South Carolina Lede is not sponsored by Kia yet. Sign and drive. 0% down? Let us know what you're driving. 803-563-7169. Do not call us while you're driving. We want you to be safe out there. Pull over. Stop in your lane. You may remember in a previous podcast where Senate Majority Leader Shane Massey lamented that the legislative session was moving too slow. Well, this week, the Senate was off to the races. Some point to the influx of new senators and old ones who are no longer around, as well as members looking to get bills that have been introduced and vetted in previous sessions but withered away on the calendar, not moving. Well, things are moving now, not to mention strong communication and coordination on some major bills with the House. Dare I say that teamwork is making the dream work?
Wow.
Some of those bills include that fentanyl and drug-induced homicide bills that are now headed to the House. If enacted into law, someone who dispenses fentanyl that causes death could face a felony charge punishable by up to 30 years in prison. The bill, like we said, goes to the House, and this comes after 2023, where a law was enacted that requires mandatory prison time for anyone convicted of trafficking fentanyl in South Carolina. Now, the Healthcare Agency Consolidation Bill S2 passed on Wednesday in the Senate as well by a vote of 42-2. The bill combines three healthcare-related agencies, and if approved, the Departments of Mental Health, Disability Services, and Alcohol and Drug Abuse Services would be combined into a brand new agency, the Department of Behavioral Health Care and Developmental Disabilities. Another bill that moved, S51, that's Beaufort Republican Senator Tom Davis's joint resolution to support state-owned Santee Cooper's request for proposals on construction of 2 reactors at the V.C. Summer nuclear site. That cleared the chamber, and it's more of just a little signaling to those interested in coming in and taking over those 2 reactors that were under construction back in 2017 to say, hey, we support what you're doing here. S-136, a bill filed by Charleston Democratic Senator Dion Tedder, would mandate the dismissal of pending unlawful handgun possession charges prior to the enactment of the 2024 constitutional carry law that passed the Senate. Another bill, S-159, was by Greenville Republican Senator Ross Turner, dealing with organized retail theft, which passed 43-0. Now, you might remember that the House approved a similar version, the same version, honestly, H-3523, which was amended to the Senate's version, goes back to the House. We'll see what they do with it, but that looks like it's poised to get to the governor soon. And of course, where are my tort heads at? Where are my torties? Tort reform has been set for special order, which gives a debate priority status. Yeah, I have gold status beginning on Tuesday. So again, what special order means is that once they go through the calendar and get through all the bills that can easily be passed, when they get to the contested calendar, that means we're talking tort reform. S-244. It's going to be a complex debate that has seen millions of dollars flow into the Statehouse and more to come. So we'll bring you all that action next week and explain what that deals with. This is going to take some time, guys. Let's skate over to the House, where on Wednesday, well, it's always the busiest day around these parts, especially in the House, because once session is underway, like we are and the calendar is full, Wednesdays become heavy work days with a flurry of floor activity on major bills. right? So they're in on Tuesday. Things start moving on Tuesday. Wednesday, everyone's been here since Tuesday. They want to go home on Thursday. They got to do it all on Wednesday. So for this Wednesday, it was the school voucher bill debate that the House Education Committee amended to remove the lottery funding aspect from it, that Senate version, and replace it with general fund dollars to the tune of $45 million this year. $30 million was already appropriated for this current fiscal year. Now, the debate didn't extend too long, and in the end, 5 of the chamber's 88 Republicans joined the Democrats in voting against the measure, which now returns to the Senate. The Senate can accept the changes made to the bill or change it back, which would set up a conference committee to hash things out. That bill passed 79 to 38 on Wednesday. But to understand the school voucher bill more, I spoke with House Education Committee Chairwoman Shannon Erickson on This Week in South Carolina, where the Beaufort Republican explained the bill this way. And it sounded so good because you know who's on the board? AT, baby. He was working those faders. It's a deep dive. Take a listen.
A few key differences. The first is that the Senate solved the problem, or their attempt to solve the problem is to change the funding stream of the bill. When we got the decision from our judicial branch, there was a majority opinion and minority opinion, and I took a lot of time, a lot of stakeholders took a lot of time, House, Senate, Governor's Office, Department of Education, we have all looked over those opinions and worked a lot of time on the off session. And what we came up with was the trustee piece needed to be tightened up. Close to the beginning of this legislative session, the Senate decided to change routes and go toward the funding formula piece. And that's the largest difference between the two bills. The House doesn't assign a funding formula at all, or a funding stream at all. Okay. It lets the budget writers, Ways and Means and Senate Finance, come up with where the money comes from and how that's appropriated. You can tell I used to serve on Ways and Means probably. I believe in that process. It's heavily vetted. We have, thanks to our forefathers, the requirement of a balanced budget every year. That's the appropriate way to go about where those funds go. Our job in the House, we saw, was to fine-tune the trustee part on how the money flowed to the students, to the actual eligible child, not to any type of programs or schools or tutor or anything. The actual child is the eligible South Carolina taxpayer, very similar to the way we give higher ed scholarships and our 4K scholarships.
So they get $6,000, 10,000 students getting $6,000 that they can use towards tuition, resources.
Books, computers, tutoring, even transportation.
So having a trustee oversee this money, how is that different than saying, that's still public money. How does that trustee make it less public? How does that beat the Supreme Court decision?
The Kittredge part of it said that we left too many details of the trustee's decision on eligible children and allocating funds to the department. Okay. And that was really where it hinged. The department is a public entity. A trustee is looking after a specific eligible child. Yeah. That takes it to the person in the state that is eligible for funding for their public education. That's, I think, where words are twisted too. Okay. We do have the responsibility of education, but it's educating the public, not a particular program. That's where I think the situation needs to go.
So then do you think that this will pass the state Supreme Court? Should it go back like it's likely, I think, to go back? And if not, why not maybe just go with what the Senate did with those lottery funds, or do tax credits, or do a constitutional amendment to change the Constitution, which says don't use public dollars for private education?
I think those are all options. Okay. What our focus has been on the House side is to make the main thing the main thing. And each time that we've taken this bill and had it considered, we have fine-tuned the piece that we were told by either courts or a system that wasn't working. To introduce a different funding stream adds, in the legal term, a novel issue, something that has not yet been decided and not been heard. And I've searched. There's no record of those lottery funds ever being cleared by the courts as not being public funds. Mm-hmm. I personally think they're probably public funds when they go into our treasury. And so then we would have to start all over with whatever that issue was that was named before, because we brought in something brand new to discuss.
So you really want to make sure that if this goes back to the Supreme Court, either if it works or it doesn't work, at least this
I'll have the answer, and this one will be done.
Gotcha.
And that's the goal.
So that being said, is that likely to happen, in your opinion, that this will go back to the courts?
Oh, I fully expect someone to challenge it. The NEA challenged it last time, and I expect that happens again. And that's the way the system works.
Sure.
I mean, we actually learn through the process. That's why we have the different branches of government.
What is the need for school choice, in your opinion? Why do we need to send this money to other schools, other
We've
students?
got so many children that don't fit into the traditional public classroom. I had 2 children raised in the same household. Both learned differently. Both had different needs. I was blessed that my husband and I could work and figure out a way to make that happen. But there are families in South Carolina that do not have that option. Again, if I read the Constitution of guaranteeing the public education, not guaranteeing public education, get the difference, that all children should have the best fit for their education model. I mean, as a teacher, I can tell you, we look for the least restrictive environment, the best place to accommodate those children's needs. And that shouldn't happen with a child that just has a specific individual education plan, an IEP. It should happen for all children if we can accommodate those. And the choices are truly the parent on where they need to decide what works for their child. I'm a former public school teacher. I am very supportive of our public school system. I believe we have great public schools, but some of them don't fit the children that are there to fit. And I believe that we've got to be more thoughtful about how we fit what we're trying to put children into. It's, square pegs and round holes.
Do you think this creates winners or losers, though, that being said?
Well, the version of the House actually fixes the problem that the Senate only addressed the poverty issue.
Okay.
We actually included children who are in foster care and under DSS care at the time. Those children are vulnerable and they need the best environment we can give them. It addresses children who are active duty military dependents. Those children come in and quite often they don't have any other school choice options because the window's closed or things like that. This would give them an opportunity to be in a different place. And we've raised the level of poverty through the system of growth. And the window there is important because those children, the ones who are in the program, their siblings, DSS, poverty level, and active duty military dependents are all the first windows to get filled. So as the General Assembly appropriates funds, those would be the children who get those services first.
And we have about 3 minutes left, and I want to ask you, this is going back to the Senate. Obviously, they're not going to agree with your term, so it's going to be a conference committee, obviously. So do you want to see that conference committee move as fast as possible to get this off to the Supreme Court?
Well, I'm not going to say obviously they won't. They have the option, and it's a Senate bill. If I go back to last session, I actually accepted what they sent to us, even though I didn't consider it perfect. I wanted the answer to the question, and I felt like it was more important to get the answer to the question than it was to pick over details. I'm a little hopeful they might do that.
But Chairwoman, when we look at other states that have passed this, including Iowa, we saw data from the Iowa Department of Education shows that in the first 2 years since they passed Iowa's voucher bill, 36 new private schools opened, 16 public schools closed. The program is now costing $360 million. Are there any assurances that we won't see this program right now swell to that level? I mean, we're talking about $30 million, now we're at $45 million, 60, 90. I mean, how do you see this going?
Most states run about 10% of their population wanting a school choice option. And that's really the kind of the baseline of what school choice is, because most families choose the school down the road that's going to be their traditional public school. And no one is insinuating that's not a good choice. What we're saying is there are other places that children can learn, and we want to make those available to them. The General Assembly will set the budget. I do not foresee the General Assembly getting so far ahead of their skis that they can't control what the growth is on this item. We do it with everything else in the budget, and none of the funding, not $1 from the funding that we're using on this program, has come from EIA or education dollars. Those have maintained. In fact, our public education dollars have been growing. We have really been dedicated to raising teacher salaries, specifically our starter teacher salaries, and that's really important to us.
We have 15 seconds, but are you worried about federal funding at this point when we hear about dismantling the U.S. Department of Education?
I'm watching it, but I'm not going to make any rash judgments. I hope that we'll see some things like teacher scholarships maintained.
Thank you. The House Judiciary Committee slapped a favorable report on H. 3650, which would create the offense of firing a gun into a home or car, as well as H. 3046, which would outlaw the creation, possession, and distribution of digitally morphed child abuse sex material, and H3127 that would add penalty enhancements for drivers who fail to stop for blue lights. We're still waiting on some action over the hands-free driving bill. Expect that next week. But in the meantime, stop holding your phone while you're driving. Stop texting while you're driving, guys. In non-bill related updates, Chairman Newton started that Judiciary Committee meeting on a, quote, point of personal privilege, quote, by addressing an out-of-state group that he says put out, quote, patently false information, quote, over the weekend about a restrictive abortion ban bill, H. 3457, filed by one of his committee members, Representative John McCravey, who's a Republican from Greenwood. Take a listen.
This is all part of my continued effort to be transparent. Over the weekend, an out-of-state group showed up in Bluffton, South Carolina, and put out some patently false information with regard to that which is known as the Human Life Protection Act 3457. That follows on a false text that went out last Thursday suggesting that I was inappropriately using my role as chairman to block the bill from coming to a full and fair hearing in front of Mr. Jordan's committee, which had already been scheduled at that point. I'm handing this out not because I want to, again, highlight that somebody is attacking me, which is fine, but I'm handing it out to make sure that you all are aware, number one, that's happening, number two, that there is some out-of-state group that puts out misinformation, whether in text or in flyers. They were fairly nice folks that were handing it out. I met them as they were walking up and down my street and down my driveway and at the Catholic church on Saturday and at my church on Sunday and the church across the street. Evidently they just don't have accurate and factual information. And in conclusion, let me just say, the House Journal and archive videos of House proceedings reflect my efforts to protect all human life, including the unborn. As a man of faith, as a husband, as a father of two young women, my conscience is clear with recognition to the heart-wrenching exceptions as rape and incest. From a freshman co-sponsoring pro-life bills when Mr. Delaney was here and led the way on pro-life matters, to a subcommittee chairman actively involved in floor debate on these important bills, as chairman of the House Judiciary, as a acting speaker during a point in time when we had the debate in the floor, and the individual that moved to reconsider after this same bill failed in the House of Representatives a handful of years ago, to then move to reconsider to add exceptions and move the bill forward. My pro-life voting record is crystal clear. I am, as part of my continued effort to be transparent, want to make sure that you all know we got out-of-state folks with false information that are here going to a level that I've not seen before in my district, and I just wanted you all to be aware of that and have the benefit of having that information.
Now, McCravey's over the Statehouse Family Caucus, and there have been tussles between him and Newton in the past, but that bill is having a subcommittee hearing next week, as you heard Chairman Newton talking about there. So a little tension under the surface there. But let's pivot outside of Columbia. And I'm not going up to Washington, D.C. In fact, I'm going down to North Charleston, where eight people have been charged in federal court for a series of bribery, kickback, extortion, and money laundering schemes following a public corruption investigation in North Charleston. 3 of the individuals charged are elected members of the North Charleston City Council. 4 individuals have been charged in total and have agreed to plead guilty, including North Charleston City Council members Jerome Hayward, Sandino Moses, and Donovan Moten, founder of Core for Success Foundation, as well as resident Aaron Charles Lee Hicks. A federal grand jury returned indictments against 4 others, Councilman Mike Brown, Goose Creek resident Tori Fields, and North Charleston residents Rose Lorenzo and Michelle Stent Hilton. The case was investigated by the FBI Columbia Field Office and the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division. Assistant U.S. Attorneys Emily Limehouse and Whit Sowards are prosecuting the case. So again, those folks that have pled guilty won't be going to trial, but we will see those who are indicted moving forward with this process. There's a lot to it, but I just want to kind of give you the top line there. But speaking of the Low Country and law, in a separate story, South Carolina Public Radio's Victoria Hansen has this feature piece on former Judge Clifton Newman. As a judge, he has been at the center of some major criminal cases in the state. Take a listen.
Impeccably dressed in a white button-down shirt and powder blue tie, former Judge Clifton Newman chuckles when asked about life after presiding over the Alec Murdaugh trial. He remembers attending a University of South Carolina women's basketball game the day after the trial ended.
From beautiful Greenville, South Carolina, it is semifinal day.
He was taking a seat before the game and suddenly heard a growing applause. He looked up, expecting to see the players.
But there was no team on the floor, and I look around, and everyone's looking at me, applauding. It was surreal.
Newman's chair squeaks as he rocks back and forth. The 73-year-old says he's actively retired and still recognized for a trial that exposed power and privilege.
This has been perhaps one of the most troubling cases.
But long before that trial, Newman was already well known in South Carolina. He comes from a family of ministers and civil rights leaders. His uncle, Isaiah DeQuincy Newman, served as the state's field director for the NAACP and was the first African American elected to the state Senate since Reconstruction. Here he talks about a newly passed 1964 Civil Rights Act.
We will do all that we can to contribute to an orderly changeover from segregation to integration.
As a child, DeQuincy Newman saw the Ku Klux Klan set a black man on fire. He couldn't stop it and devoted his adult life to helping people.
I'm quite fond of him as we sit here today. I have his desk from the Statehouse.
A small wooden desk in the corner of Newman's spare Columbia office reminds him of the uncle who encouraged him to go to law school. But the stage may have already been set by a principal in his hometown of Greeleyville. He cast the teenager as an attorney with the NAACP, fighting for school desegregation, in a play based on a South Carolina case that became part of Brown versus the Board of Education.
So my grandfather purchased me a suit, the very first suit. I was mighty dressed up and proud of that role.
Raised by his grandfather and an aunt, Newman was able to attend college in Cleveland because a family his mother moved north to work for helped him get a scholarship. It was the first time he shared classes with white students.
It helped me to understand that people are people.
Newman worked as a defense attorney in Cleveland before moving back and eventually opening a practice in Kingstree, a predominantly black community not far from where he grew up. He later became a prosecutor and a circuit court judge at a time when there were few who looked like him. There still aren't. But with each new role, Newman saw an opportunity to do what his uncle did, help people.
I don't throw the book at the person because they committed a crime. And I'm trying to understand that person, and I'm a man of second chances when I can.
As a prosecutor, he gave Quincy Singletary a second chance.
I could have lost my little family that I had started and lost my job.
Singleton says Newman asked why he sold drugs. He admitted for money and promised to stop in exchange for a lesser charge.
I mean, he's just a different person. He just cares about people.
Lately, Newman has been thinking a lot about his Uncle DeQuincy as the nation faces a conservative push to erase diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. But Newman remains optimistic.
But you can't legislate a person's heart. There's no way that men of goodwill, women of goodwill will be stifled by the stroke of a pen.
He's overseen decades of criminal cases, yet still believes in the good in people.
Thank you, Victoria. You can find that story and much more on southcarolinapublicradio.org. That's where the gavel lives, the Statehouse gavel, that is. Best way to keep up with what's going on in the Statehouse in between lead podcast episodes. Let's have a quick little econ section on our way out, just so you know what's going on, because we're talking inflation. Ever heard of it?
Yes.
Oh, well, good. I didn't want to explain it because it's so complicated. Eggs. Well, new numbers from the Federal Reserve's Preferred Inflation Gauge, the Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, also known as PC Price Index, cooled in January to 2.5% from the year before. Data! And that slowed down from December's 2.6% annual rate. This, according to the Commerce Department data that was released on Friday. Consumer confidence had its most significant drop in 3.5 years in February, while concerns over 12-month inflation rates surged. So a lot of confidence issue. Now, this is according to the Conference Board survey. The Consumer Confidence Index dropped 7 points, the biggest decline since August 2021, to 98.3 this month. So consumers out there who make up the largest part of our economy, they're a little iffy. Bad! Are you iffy? Are you guys shopping? What are you doing? You holding your money? You driving and texting? You're not supposed to do that. 803-563-7169. Stop. Call. And for a little seasoning on top, Tariffs are back. President Donald Trump announced on Thursday that he's adding an additional 10% to Chinese imports, bringing the total to 20%. And the 25% tariffs on Canadian and Mexican imported goods will go into effect on March 4th. And separately, that's 10% on Canadian energy products. We import a lot of natural gas, oil, all that stuff from Canada too. Remember the Keystone XL pipeline? Where do you think that's coming from? America's hat, Canada. Remember, those Canadian and Mexican tariffs were delayed last month when leaders of both countries made pledges to increase border security and crack down on drug smuggling. Trump has also ordered global 25% tariffs on imports of steel and aluminum, which are set to take effect on March 12. We were talking about March Madness, folks. This is just a little tip of it. Now expect countries affected by these to retaliate, as China already has. Translation: higher prices on goods we import from other countries. Welcome to the wind down section, our little break from the news. We're glad you're here with me and A.T. Shire, lead podcast producer.
Here I am, folks.
And A.T.,
I'm standing up.
Tell them what you're wearing. Show us.
Who are you wearing?
Number 20. Who are you wearing?
This is a 2004 Brian Dawkins.
Of course.
White away jersey.
I like the white. It looks good. I like the Eagles logo. I've been seeing all the different logos.
That's right. Through the years. If you look at this one, it's a medium.
It looks like a true medium. We're getting better. That looks like a good fit.
I learned from the McNabb that went down to my knees.
Yes.
But I would say the McNabb is a large. It goes down to my knees.
I put it on afterwards, too. And
Gavin
is
is wearing
in that
it.
tent.
This is a medium, and it fits like it's 3 or 4 sizes smaller.
Yeah.
It's drastic. Reebok, what the heck were you doing in the early 2000s? You deserve to lose the NFL contract.
I feel like I'd have to get if I ever got a jersey, I'd have to get like a small, probably, just so I could be like sporty with it.
Now they fit like shirts, and you can order them normal because Nike came along and brought some sanity to the whole thing.
And said, what are you psychopaths doing? This is for consumers, not for athletes.
Yes. Please make it fit like a shirt.
And everyone's like, oh, yeah, because it's like, what's your size chart for
it doesn't,
adult jersey?
And this was before you could Google anything, okay? might I remind you of how slow the internet was in the year 2004?
I don't even remember.
It was
We are
terrible.
so warped.
I was AIMing people. Speaking of AIM and communications, Gavin, we did get a call from another listener.
The segue almost had me spit out my water right there. That was good.
That's good for the microphone.
You guys can also you guys can instant message us.
You can. It's called a text. Anyway, Gavin, are you ready?
It was a quarter a text. I can't afford that. Yes, I'm ready.
Here we go.
Hey, AT and Gavin, this is driver instructor Daniel in Lawrence. My preferred local paper is the Clinton Chronicle. And your discussion about how expensive cowboy boots are got me thinking about something from Terry Pratchett's Discworld. In one of his books, the commander of the guard reflects on how expensive it is to be a poor person. He thinks about how a poor guardsman could only ever afford a $10 pair of boots, and they would replace them every 6 months. If that guardsman could ever save up $50, they could buy a pair of boots that could last them up to 5 years. In the long run, they end up paying more money for lower quality items that they have to keep replacing them over and over again. It makes me think of the work that Scott Morgan did with the Indebted podcast, which kind of put everything full circle in the SC public radio sphere. And it got me thinking about how I grew up, always wearing low-quality clothes, eating low-quality food, driving low-quality cars, and having to replace it over and over again. And I'm finally at a place in my life where I can afford stuff that lasts. It got me thinking about what I need to do to help people. So right now I'm sitting in front of the SV Empowerment Center in Gray Court, getting ready to find out what I can do to volunteer to help people out. And I'd like to encourage everybody to do the same. Find some place, some way to help people, because every poor person you know is spending every cent they have just trying to survive. Y'all take care. Bye.
Driver Daniel, what a wonderful and powerful message there. Just more, we need to hear more of that stuff. I mean, you got to realize, that what you take for granted. A lot of people, I think, talk about that, but they don't take the action into actually doing things, because that's the granular stuff that makes the difference there. And thank you for referencing that great work by Scott Morgan in the Indebted podcast
Great
series.
show, might I add.
Looking into that, because it's hard. I mean, you get stuck in that cycle, and if you don't have support, if you don't have family, if you're like, I realize how much I take for granted my family and the ability that we have such a stable, my parents, my grandparents, everyone like had gone to college, everyone had like solid jobs. Like you never thought twice. And then you meet people who maybe don't know their parents. They don't know their background. They are working day to day and struggling. It's like, you really do need to check yourself. And that was a really important call right there. So that was nice from you,
I just love
Daniel.
how our callers, driver Daniel, thank you so much. You're just all better than me and Gavin.
Well, and I love the thought provoke. And I'd love to think big and like think differently because we can get so caught up, especially nowadays, at the day to day, the grind, the news, the never ending news. And it's like, you need to really just catch your breath, realize what you got, and then try and be better and do your best and control what you can control because that's all you got going on right now. And we can't control much, I'll tell you that.
No, and
it's the illusion of control.
I do think it's kind of crazy for two dudes on a news podcast to be saying, maybe check out of the news just a little bit sometimes, because you got to think about the energy that you expel reading that news, reacting to that news, and talking to other people about that news. Like it's so much, and it's always pumping more and more and more. Like I wish we could go back to those 2004 times when the pages wouldn't load, when you didn't get push notifications. Push notifications are about the worst thing in the world to ever happen.
And I think the most important thing too is again, control what you can control. Like as much as I try to keep up with national stuff and international stuff, it's like I need to know what's going on at the local level too, and I'll catch what I need to because the world keeps spinning without me knowing what's going on in D.C. and across the world. But I want to know what's happening in Columbia and in Charleston and Greenville. But I think a good way to also mitigate the insanity of the news cycle is to actually, and I would love if this ever happened, but to go back to reading a newspaper, listening to public radio when you can, watching the nightly newscast, watching PBS NewsHour. I always said if it didn't make it on PBS NewsHour, then you probably don't necessarily need to know about it. But like
it's a good filter.
Having these contained things and letting them do what they do. I mean, I love reading the Wall Street Journal e-edition because it's all there. You can flip through it.
E stands for electronic?
Yes.
Okay.
PDF.
Yeah, just make sure.
And if I was to tell you, find me all these stories on the website, you wouldn't be able to do it because there's a reason why it's laid out the way it is in a newspaper. The biggest stories are on the front page, and then it goes down from there. But you learn what's going on. You learn the news, and everything else can kind of be noise after that. So focus on what you can control. Get a good amount of it, but don't overwhelm yourself with it.
I like the idea of like watching the news at night.
Yes.
That is your news, and then that's enough of it.
There you go.
Then you put it away.
Yes.
Jeopardy or Wheel of Fortune comes on.
Go about your business.
And then I got to say, Wheel of Fortune should be second. Jeopardy should be first.
Sure.
I moved to this place, and Jeopardy is after Wheel of Fortune, and I don't like this.
Well, I was at the gym the other day, and they had one of the toss-up puzzles, and it was like African safari.
Yeah.
And it basically got down to like the last I in safari or the last two I's in safari.
Oh, that was the answer.
And I'm like, guys.
And you're just running.
I'm like, guys.
African safari.
How did you get on the show?
Yeah, that's why they're on the show. That's why they're on the show.
Like, what else could that word be?
I really do think that Wheel of Fortune is BS, though, because it's always like thing, and it's like red spatula.
Yeah.
And you're like, that is so dumb.
Yeah.
What is that?
I haven't seen it since
it takes
Ryan
no
Seacrest
logic.
took
Also,
over.
I also got to say, and this is the last thing I'm going to say.
Sure.
I don't know how we got on this. I'm so sorry to everyone. But buying a vowel in Wheel of Fortune is the biggest waste of money. Why are these people doing it? It doesn't make any sense. And if you're on Jeopardy, bet big on the daily doubles, please. That's the only way to win.
Is anyone listening to
Come on! It's called gameplay! Anyway, Gavin, have a good weekend.
Oh my gosh.
It's going to be nice, I
If
think.
you have a dissertation or a doctoral thesis on these issues, please forward it
I
to
also
us.
don't like how they jump around like crazy on Jeopardy anymore.
Make it easy.
I liked going in order, okay? But I do have to stay. We have to stop. We have to stop. Daniel, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm sorry that your great call turned into this. I don't know why this happens.
That's what it's there for. It's to make us think and make us talk about these issues.
Let's start over.
Like paying for vowels.
It's a Brian Dawkins jersey. It's a Brian Dawkins jersey. Okay, go Birds, go B-Doc. Gavin,
Oh,
take
thank you,
the
thank you,
credits.
y'all, always for listening. We love when you call us, like Driver Daniel did at 803-563-7169. Get our thinking caps on, as they say back in school. And you can always leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We love that too. And you can stay updated with the latest news on scetv.org and southcarolinapublicradio.org. And don't forget to support your local newspapers, like the Clinton Chronicle. The South Carolina Lede is a production of South Carolina Public Radio. Our producer is A.T. Shire. Amy Crouch is our supervising producer. Sean Birch is our executive producer. This podcast is produced with support from PRX and is made possible in part by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, as well as listener contributions to the ETV Endowment of South Carolina. For the South Carolina Lede, I'm Gavin Jackson. Be well, South Carolina. I have it already. It's just I wanted to get here ASAP.
No, I get it.
For my baby.
For my baby.
For our.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.